All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started in one more minute. Thanks for being here. All right, I think we are good to go. We have 45 minutes. We are going to try to be very thoughtful about that time. My name is David Klerman. I have the honor of being the Director of Strategic Initiatives at this point, and am joined by my co-presenter and colleague in this whole thing, Julia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Collette, and I'm the Strategic Planning Coordinator for MACUHO.
Thank you. So we are going to dive into talking about the 2020-2025 strategic plan. Julia just shared a link to the 2015-2020 strategic plan summary. And so MACUHO has had a history of doing 5-year strategic plans. And so, of course, we need to be wrapping up the previous one. And so that summary, as well as a link to the original plan, is located in that link. So you are welcome to be looking at that at any point in time that you would like. I also think that it is important to recognize that our 2020-25 strategic plan is available on the MACUHO website as well. Julia shared that link as well. And so please read this at your own leisure. We are not going page by page through this because that would be really boring for everybody. And so we are touching on talking about the process of how we got here, and really doing the higher level stuff. And then our intention is to save roughly 15 minutes. So the last 15 minutes to be able to answer questions that you have. So feel free to be throwing those into the chat, or we can just unmute people a little bit later on for that live Q&A.
So when all is said and done, the 2020-2025 strategic plan has 5 strategic themes. They are finances, technology, community, equity and inclusion, and housing and facilities operations. You can see the breakdown of the goals and implementation strategies within each strategic theme, but overall there are 27 goals and 89 implementation strategies. And while that sounds like a lot, we'd like to remind everyone that this is an aspirational document, and that we have 5 years to complete all of these things. And so, you know, part of it too is that they are goals, and so some of them might be challenging and we may not accomplish everything that we set out to do for the next 5 years, but that's okay. So how did we get here? How did we make this happen? We started this process by having a document review. So we overviewed the Constitution and bylaws, assessment data from the 15-20 plan, annual conference surveys, assessment from MAPC and SSLI, other annual events, and task force reports that took place a couple of years ago. And so based on all that data that we collected, we put together a tentative plan, and then we asked for recommendations for the goals and implementation from the executive board and the leadership council. And from there, we organized everything into 5 strategic themes. Something that is important to point out is that we wrote this plan in the context of COVID-19 and a racial justice movement. And so we hope that that is outlined in the plan well enough to understand that, you know, it might be challenging for us to meet some of our financial goals, because everyone will be experiencing a financial hit. Our strategic theme on equity and inclusion is very much intended to look at the racism that exists within our association and the world, and how we can work to be an anti-racist organization. And then lastly, this plan was approved by the executive board on October 9th, 2020.
So the higher level aspects, we're going to touch on each of those, as well as the goals that we'll review for each section. So for finances, the purpose of this section is to bring attention to really the most important aspects of the financial development for MACUHO. The listed goals that are on the next pages support the development of a clear financial plan and guidelines that are going to meet both the immediate and the long-term needs of our association and its members. We have given special attention to the development of new relationships with the corporate partners and sponsors, as their financial support provides MACUHO's operating budget. Conference pricing is also given attention so that MACUHO can balance affordability and financial sustainability for its members. So our goals in this area are that we are looking to decide about how we're sharing our financial information with membership. We don't need to necessarily get into the nitty-gritty, but it is important that we are still sharing some information, so determining what that's going to look like. Adhering to internal fiscal controls. We have a financial review board that hasn't been around for too long, and so still being able to develop the robustness of that oversight, and that so ensure that we are doing the best with everybody's money. To develop opportunity for reduced rate conference costs. This year you saw the buy one, give one, and that is an example. While it's only $25 this year, and we probably can't do something like that when the conference costs $300, how can we reduce the costs so that others who may not have those financial resources can be able to still partake in our conference activities? And then, of course, being thoughtful about the cost of conferences so that they can occur at not a large amount of cost. The last three goals in this area are about focusing on the value-added features. How do we ensure that our corporate partners are getting what they want and making changes towards that? Retaining the ones that we have and recruiting additional ones. And then lastly, increasing our income and reserves. MACUHO is a very fiscally healthy organization, but it doesn't take too many years of no conferences or low attendance or low partnerships for that to go away pretty quickly. So those are three things that we are definitely keeping an eye on in the future.
The next strategic theme that I'm going to talk about is technology. So MACUHO's technology efforts include supporting infrastructure and improving communication. And so this infrastructure refers to the MACUHO Executive Board making decisions about where to store and share documents and information. And so we've done some of that using Google, which has been really helpful. And then the communication piece of this refers to maintaining a website that is more easily navigated, maintaining a relevant social media presence, and sharing information out on multiple platforms. Technology will also be used as a means to educate members, aid in connecting members to one another, and provide information for upcoming events. The MACUHO website will serve as the primary location for getting the most up-to-date information. So the goals include regular communication through scheduled magazines, discussion boards, and blog entries, create communication platforms and facilitate ongoing discussion and data sharing for various engagement levels, including graduate level up through senior level, partners and sponsors for financial stability. It will also include reevaluating the customer relationship management platform contract that will meet the needs of MACUHO leaders and members at a financial cost that is less than what is currently being paid. That's very helpful. And then establish a comprehensive online presence, engaging members through social media and the MACUHO websites. Oh, there are more. So we will also evaluate and secure sufficient online file storage solutions to benefit leadership transitions and committee coordinator responsibilities, provide consistent webinar opportunities for members, and enhance the technological interface that corporate partners and sponsors utilize to communicate with the membership.
All right, so our third overarching or strategic theme, as we're calling them, is community. This used to be called engagement the last time around. But essentially, our goal in this is to represent for MACUHO to represent a professional home for its members by fostering opportunities for engagement with others. We're going to do this through educational development opportunities at all levels, including undergraduate students, graduate students, all the way through senior level professionals. Members are going to give to MACUHO as well by being active participants who contribute to our educational content, attending conferences, and finding the connections with other members. And then MACUHO is going to give back to its members by creating an association where members can invest in their professional development and the future of our profession. Lastly, we will recruit and retain members from all areas of the region and develop partnerships with bordering regional associations. So essentially, we are looking to create participation amongst all the levels in the regions. We are pretty big. We cover a large geographic area, not as big as some other ACUHO regions, but it is still a decent space, and we have a lot more participation in some areas than others. And so how can we address that? We also want to provide outreach to create opportunities for undergraduate students to participate in some leadership opportunities. We also want to recruit institutions or members from institutions that don't typically attend, where there isn't a whole lot of recent involvement. And then lastly, be intentional about developing partnerships with our bordering organizations, GLACUHO, NEACUHO, and CIHO. We know that we will sometimes bring in people from just to the north of us for some of our events, such as RELI or even SSLI. And we also have some institutions in Northern Virginia, and it's much easier for them to attend something in our region than if their conference may be down in Florida.
Our next strategic theme is about equity and inclusion. And so the aim with this strategic theme is twofold. One of them is restructuring our internalized and oppressive practices, and the other is continuing education regarding social justice with a focus on racism. And so MACUHO is committed to advocating for social justice alongside all marginalized identities by decolonizing our policies and procedures to become an anti-racist organization. MACUHO will create opportunities for members to address white supremacy and systemic oppression. And MACUHO is committed to supporting members with marginalized identities and providing education to members about issues related to oppression and identity. And when we were looking at sort of some of the language that we were using in the strategic theme, we intentionally picked the word marginalized because we want to acknowledge that there are power structures that exist within the world, within our community, regardless of the number of like the quantifiable diversity that we see within MACUHO, but that regardless of that, there is still marginalization. There's still a structure of power that is oppressing people with marginalized identities. Okay, so some of the goals include increased participation from minority serving institutions and professionals of color, support marginalized staff members through online and in-person communication and affirmation efforts, educate its members on diversity, equity, and inclusion with a focus on race, gender, and sexuality, and take actions to dismantle decolonization policies or procedures and affirm itself as an anti-racist organization.
The final strategic theme focuses on housing and facilities operations, or HFO, with really focus on the business relationships, because we are a two sides of a house often, but we need each other in order for our jobs to exist. And so this section really relates to the operations, maintenance, technology, construction projects, human resources, and attending to the students' needs. To dig into each of those a little bit more, operations and maintenance refers to the best practices between facilities, residence life, and housekeeping. includes campus safety, emergency planning, conference services, assignments, budgeting, and acquiring off-campus complexes. Technology refers to the software as service and technology aspects such as Wi-Fi, electrical, voice over IP, TV over IP, cable TV, and card access. Construction projects refers to the housing standards and design and best practices for managing contractors, master planning and finances. And then human resources refers to the team building as a housing and facilities operations staff. The last area was attending to student needs, and that includes the support for emotional support animals, ADA compliance, holistic student well-being, and programming around preventative maintenance. And so our goals in this section relate to recruiting and increasing the number of program proposals that come from housing and facilities operations side, and an aim for 20% of accepted program proposals at our annual conference relating to that. We want to expand learning and networking opportunities for our HFO professionals outside of our annual conference and have some publications that relate to this topic as well. We also want to expand the learning and networking opportunity. Oh, we copied that one twice. Yay, go us. We want to develop a database and network of all housing and facilities professionals, vendors, and sponsors so people can be working with each other and be connected. And then lastly, recruit and aim so that 20% of the accepted proposals are in that area. I think I said that already. I may have missed that one, but we'll move on.
So each goal has 2 executive board champions assigned to it. This is to really aid in accountability so that we can accomplish the goals. With, specifically looking at equity and inclusion, we recognize that this is something that we'll always have to be working on. It's not like we're ever going to arrive at this and be like, all right, check, we've done all this and now there's no more work to be done, right? But we hope that the strategic initiatives or the implementation strategies are essentially able to be are achievable in a way that we can then build off of what we currently have for the next strategic plan. There are also leadership coordinators and support for every single goal, and those folks are identified within the implementation strategies. So our goal sequencing sheet is on, I think, page 34 of our strategic plan, if you want to scroll to that. And so we designed this to ensure that the goals were taking place, were spread out over the course of the next 5 years. And that, they are, this is meant really to be aspirational, I guess. It's okay if sometimes a goal doesn't get accomplished in a certain designated year, but we set it up this way so that no one had too much work to do, or no position had too much work to do over the course of the 5 years, or it wasn't like, all right, we have 27 goals and half of them need to be completed in the first year. That's just unreasonable. And so the way we spread it out, no executive board champion or leadership council member has more than 2 goals targeted for the completion of any 1 year. And so we hope that we have really sort of spread the love, if you will.
And so in terms of how we're going to continue to move forward, the budget requests from committees and coordinator positions are going to tie into our strategic plan. So while there are some things that have to happen year in and year out that don't fall into the strategic plan, they're just part of MACUHO's regular responsibilities. Anything outside of those regular expenditures needs to be requested, and it needs to be tying into one of these strategic plans. And so that helps us ensure that we're putting the resources, both financial as well as effort, into accomplishing these. And there are opportunities to be checking through these on a quarterly basis, because on the Executive Board and Leadership Council, there's essentially a status update that is submitted quarterly. And part of that will be talking about, hey, what work have you done this quarter working towards the goals that are outlined for you in the strategic plan? What the work that Julia and I are going to continue to do moving forward is to provide support to everybody, all the executive officers, all of the Leadership Council members, to summarize, this is what your individualized strategic plan looks like. So we're going to pull the goals out so people don't need to be looking at the larger 36-page document, and be able to talk to them about how we can individually support and help make those things happen. The implementation strategies that were created, we tried to make them goal-oriented enough or action-oriented enough, and measurable enough to know whether we have accomplished them or not. And we intend to, on a yearly basis, especially around the annual conference as our plan, to be able to say, hey, this is where we are at year one. This is what we've accomplished. These are the things that are still in progress. And some goals may no longer be reasonable because of changes in circumstances with our association or the larger field of higher education and housing and residential life. And so this is also a living document. Julia has said it's aspirational, but it can also change if we need it to. So we are turning over with 20 minutes left, because we finished a little bit on the early side, to be able to answer questions, because we know that this is a lot of information, and we only did the high level stuff. If you have looked at the 36-page document, you will see that this was done over the period of 2 years to get to this point, and involved a lot of people, of which we highlighted some of those within the report in Appendix A. So while Julie and I have crafted this final version, it's a lot of people, including members of the Executive Board and Leadership Council, who have helped us get to this point. But we do want to be able to answer questions that you have, or about why something's there or not there. So I'll open the floor. And feel free to just unmute yourself or to throw something into the chat. All right. Julia, can you pull this up and share your screen with the strategic plan on page 29, please? A lot of detailed information. Obviously, in our presentation, we messed up some of the HFO goals, so we can look at those pages and be able to actually review all 5 of the ones that were in that area.
David, I can't share my screen while you're sharing yours, so you have to stop. Okay, great. There we go.
The way that we did this as a publication is that for every page is one goal, with the implementation strategies that fall underneath of it. So thank you, Julia. So this is one of the ones that we did not talk about, that MACUHO is going to encourage presentations that evolve on diversity topics. So ADA, ESA, religious accommodations, to provide areas of insight within the housing and facilities operations area. And then the other goal that we missed in the presentation is that we are looking to create a strategic partner with APA, Leadership in Educational Facilities. APA is the national organization for higher education facilities management. And there's an opportunity for us to be able to leverage some connections. There's actually a regional association that exists. So we're going to explore that and see if it ends up being something that's possible.
I think that's all of them, right? We got this one.
Yeah, we got the other three.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Julia.
Yeah.
So that's really our shtick. And it's going to be a lot of people's. So this is something that is going to fall squarely on executive board officers as well as leadership council members to be able to continue to work on. I know that Tiffany is going to provide time for us to continue to talk about this as we move forward. Both Julia and my terms end in another year, and so we'll be working to pass this on and transition it to whomever are in those positions next. But our goal is to really set and lay a solid foundation for the next 5 years for our association of where we think that we should be, so we can really truly be the comprehensive organization that MACUHO was founded as well as take us into the future with addressing current issues. So Brian has asked a question, mentioned how the weight of implementing this falls on all leaders. What are your intended touch points or structural suggestions to ensure annual accountability for implementing this great plan? Well, thanks for calling it great. It's a great question, and it's part of what Julia and I are going to be working on. So one of the things I said is we're going to create an individual position-based strategic plan snapshot. And so that way, not getting overwhelmed. Once again, in the larger document, it's important that everybody knows what everybody else is doing, but snapping it down to just 3 or 4 pages to say, hey, as a committee, this is what you need to be working on in addition to the normal responsibilities that you work on. The budget and goals worksheet is going to tie into that. The leadership quarterly reports and updates are going to ask what progress you've done working towards the accomplishing of those strategic and the implementation strategies, because that's really how it's going to be done. So those are our starting points and the tangible things, Brian. Ray also put this in here, and since Ray is going to be on our executive board for the next 2 years as our treasurer, we're going to be talking about it at our regular meetings. I think that is something that has not always happened. And so when you don't talk about something, it just, especially if you don't like it, strategic plan can be really ominous and it can cause some anxiety. And so it's easy to just put it back in the corner and forget that it exists. So it's agenda item number 2, apparently, on every agenda. So thanks, Tiffany. Are there other questions that folks have or comments that they want to make? Julia, feel free to chime in. Leadership Council, e-board members who are part of giving this feedback to help us get to this point, feel free to chime in as well.
You gave me permission to unmute myself, David, so here we go. And the eye rolls. I just wanted to add on to what Ray had mentioned in there. So we've not always done the best job of prioritizing these things in the agenda and just the annual business of what we do. So with the help of several individuals, like David mentioned, we began to ease back into the actual written reports being asked of every leadership position within MACUHO. So it's not just simply a verbal update or when you get around to it. There are set times throughout the year where the directors will be checking in with the various committees, see how they're doing on those goals and making sure they're leading up to the submission of a written report and how they're doing on those things to complement, the check-ins we're doing in our annual meetings. And what that's going to allow us to do is feed those reports into our larger executive board meetings and make sure if we see something that might need nudged in a certain direction or we see something that is moving and doing excellent work, we can provide resources and attention we need to make sure that they have what they have. So I think in addition to those agenda items like Ray and Tiffany mentioned, those written reports are going to be a big part of keeping us on track, keeping us accountable, and assisting with the transition, because this is a 5-year plan. A lot of us are going to be moving on. So as someone new comes into the position, log into that Google Drive that we have now, and you're able to see the last 3-4 years of someone's reports quarterly and how they've been meeting their goals. And that'll set you up for success when you come in.
Thanks, Johnny. I think that transition from year to year and from person to person is really important, because I think a lot of the current leadership of the association will be off the board in 4 years or 5 years, and there's going to be new people in. And so being able to pass things along so it makes sense and it's still ownership of that plan, even though they may not have been part in creating it at the forefront. And then can work on the next 15 or 2025, 2030, which is really scary to think already.